Finance news is not power, a structural analysis of information control and illusion. In modern economics, information is treated as a proxy for power. The assumption is simple and widespread. Those who know more, earlier, and better will act more effectively. From this assumption emerges an entire industry of business and finance news. Headlines, analysis, rankings, top websites, experts' opinions, curated narratives designed to help individuals stay informed. Yet this assumption collapses under scrutiny. Information as distributed through mainstream finance news doesn't confer power. At best, it provides orientation. At worst, it creates false confidence and strategic delay. And today, I'll be arguing that mainstream business and finance news functions not as a mechanism of advantage, but as a stabilizing layer in the economic system. It explains outcomes after they occur, legitimizes decisions already taken elsewhere, and channels attention towards narratives that reduce uh, uncertainty rather than exploit it. Power doesn't reside in the consumption of such information. Power resides upstream, in the domains of capital allocation, policy formation, institutional incentives, and silent coordination. To confuse the two is to mistake weather reports for control of the climate. The myth of being well informed. The modern reader is trained to believe that frequency equals competence. Daily exposure to market updates, earning reports, geopolitical analysis, and expert commentary creates a sensation of engagement. But engagement is not leverage. Finance news operates on a retrospective logic. It explains why something happened after the market has already incorporated that information into prices, positioning, and expectations. By the time a development is reported, interpreted, and disseminated, it has ceased to be actionable in any asymmetric sense. What remains is consensus. It is not accidental. News organizations are structurally incapable of being early in the way power requires. They are bound by verification norms, reputational risk, legal constraint, audience comprehension. These constraints ensure reliability, but they also ensure lateness. Reliability and advantage are not the same objective. The reader therefore is not positioned as an actor, but a recipient of closure. News closure's uncertainty, power thrives on it. Lists, rankings, and comfort economy. Rankings of top finance websites illustrates this perfectly. They represent familiarity as value. The same institutions recur because they are recognized, not because they offer structural advantage. Such lists do not differentiate between types of readers: retail participants, institutional analysts, policymakers, corporate strategies, because differentiation would expose the hierarchy they depend on obscuring. Lists function psychologically, not strategically. They reduce complexity into consumable form. They offer reassurance that one is following the right sources, thereby substituting confidence for competence. This is not malicious, it is functional. Most participants in the economy do not seek power, they seek stability, predictability, and narrative coherence. Finance news satisfies this demand. For those who mistake comfort for age, the result is systematic underperformance, intellectual, strategic, and often financial. Narrative versus signal. At the core of the problem lies a fundamental confusion between narratives and signals. Narratives are coherent stories that explain reality in hindsight. They are socially transmissible, emotionally satisfying, and cognitively manageable. Signals, by contrast, are fragmentary, ambiguous, and often unintelligible without context. They do not explain, they indicate. They are not designed to persuade, they are designed to alert. Finance news is almost entirely narrative driven. It translates complex processes into linear explanations. Inflation rises because of X, markets fall due to Y. Policy shifts reflect S. These translations are necessary for mass communication. They strip away precisely the elements that confer advantage: timing, uncertainty, and partial information. Signal exists elsewhere in capital flows, before headlines, in regulatory drafts, before announcements, in supply chain stress, before earning calls, in political incentives, before speeches. These domains are accessible through daily news consumption. They require structural access, domain literacy, and patience. The news arrives after signals have already been acted upon. Media as a stabilizing institution. Contrary to popular belief, the primary function of mainstream media is not disruption, it is stabilization. Markets are social systems that depend on shared expectations, legitimacy, and trust. Media plays a crucial role in maintaining these conditions by framing events in ways that preserve continuity. Even negative news is presented within explanatory framework that imply manageability, correction, cycles, adjustments, and recoveries. This is why truly destabilizing information rarely appears as breaking news. When it does, it is often already unavoidable. By reinforcing consensus and normalizing outcome, finance media reduces panic, limits flexibility, and supports institutional continuity. This is valuable from a systematic perspective, but is not a source of power for the individual reader. It is a mechanism of order. Who actually has the edge? To understand where power resides, one must examine who acts before narratives form. Policymakers operate in draft space, not announcement space. Large institutions move capital quietly, fragmented institutions try to avoid it. Corporations make strategic decisions months or years before results appear in earnings. Political actors shape incentives long before rhetoric reflects them. These actors do not rely on news to decide, they rely on incentives, constraints, and forward planning. When they read news at all, it is to assess public perception, not to gain insight. The asymmetry is clear. News is consumed downstream by those without control over the variables that matter the most. The illusion of participation. Perhaps the most dangerous effect of finance news is the illusion of participation. Reading, discussing, sharing, and analyzing creates the feeling of involvement. But feeling involved is not the same as being positioned. The illusion absorbs cognitive energy that could otherwise be directed towards skill acquisition, structural understanding, or genuine strategic planning. It creates a cycle in which individual reacts to information rather than shaping conditions. Over time, this reactive posture becomes habitual. Results is not ignorance but dependence, reframing the role of news. None of this implies that finance news is useless. It lies value elsewhere. Finance news is effective for tracking dominant narrative, understanding consensus expectations, monitoring institutional messaging, identifying what the majority believes. It is not effective for generating first order advantage, predicting inflection points, assessing non public incentives, creating asymmetric positions. Used correctly, news is a diagnostic tool. Used incorrectly, it becomes a substitute for strategy. Conclusion: power is quiet, news is loud. The central error is not consuming finance news. The error is mistaking consumption for control. Power doesn't announce itself, it relocates resources, adjusts incentive, and shapes constraints long before outcome is visible. News by design arrives after these processes have matured enough to be explained safely. Those who seek dominance must therefore reverse their relationship with information. Instead of asking what happened, they must ask what must already be true for this to have happened. Instead of following headlines, they must study structures. Instead of chasing narrative, they must observe silence. Finance news will continue to matter to systems, to markets, to publics, but it will never be where power originates. Power moves first, news explains it later.